In this lecture, we are going to talk about the osmolarity, osmotic pressure, and calculation of osmotic pressure. Now, osmolarity is simply related to the number of particles of solute in a solution. It is simply related to the osmotically active particles of a solute in a solution. Osmosis is basically the movement of water across a semi-permeable membrane, and the amount of pressure required to stop that movement of water across a semi-permeable membrane is osmotic pressure. Now, we are going to explain and calculate these terms with the help of some examples. Now, suppose, for example, we have this container. In which we have put a semi-permeable membrane, and in this container we have put a fluid. For example, this is water here on one side with very less solute. On the other side of the semi-permeable membrane, we have the water with a lot of solutes. Now we know that the movement of water from a region where there is high concentration of water through a semi-permeable membrane towards a region where there is less concentration of water or high concentration of solute is known as osmosis. Now, this is something which we have previously discussed in our previous lectures. This is the lecture in which we discussed that there is basically movement of water from region of high concentration of water or low concentration of solute to region with low concentration of water or high concentration of solute, and after movement of water, the concentration of water on that side decreases as this. This is something which we discussed previously. Now, this movement of water, when the movement of water occurs from this side to this side, the amount of water on this side, increases. Now we can see there is an increase. This much increase. See, there is increase in the level of water. This much increase in the level of water due to the movement of water, due to the osmosis. Because solutes are high here, because the water concentration is low here and the water concentration is high here, so water starts moving across this membrane, and this membrane is basically semi-permeable membrane. It will allow the movement of water, but it will not allow the movement of solute. So due to movement of water across the membrane, the water concentration here increases and the level of water rises on this side, and it has increased this much. Now the pressure, the amount of pressure needed at this level to stop the movement of water from this side to this side is the osmotic pressure. The amount of pressure needed, we need to apply some pressure on this side to stop the movement of water from this side, to stop the osmosis or the movement of water from the higher concentration of water to low concentration of water. That amount of pressure needed is basically the osmotic pressure. Now we are going to calculate the osmotic pressure required for a particular solution. Now, we need to remember that osmotic pressure is basically related to the amount or the number of osmotically active particles. Suppose we have three different types of solutes. Here we have the albumin proteins, which have bigger solute particles. The particles are very large. And here we have glucose. The particles are large, the molecular weight is big. And here we have the sodium chloride. Now, each and every molecule of albumin and glucose has just one osmotically active particle. Every molecule of albumin and every molecule of glucose has one osmotically active particle, and osmotically active particles basically determine the osmotic pressure. The size of the particle, the molecular weight of the particle will not determine. Here in sodium chloride, every molecule of sodium chloride has basically two osmotically active particles. Here you see there are two osmotically active particles in sodium chloride. Here the molecular size is not that much big, the molecular weight of sodium chloride is not that great, but the osmotic pressure, the osmolarity which is due to the particles in that solution is higher for sodium chloride as compared to osmolarity or the osmotic pressure for the albumin or the glucose. Now this is something which we discussed previously in our last lecture, and we discussed that if we have three different types of substances, here we have the glucose which has one molecule, and the osmotically active particle is also one. Here we have the sodium chloride with one molecule containing two osmotically active particles, and here we had a sodium sulfate with each molecule containing three osmotically active particles. So the osmotic pressure of sodium sulfate was higher than sodium chloride, and this osmotic pressure of sodium chloride was higher than glucose, because the osmolarity is basically related to the number of osmotically active particles. It is not related with the size of the molecule or the molecular weight. So it is all about the number of particles. Now, if we have this sodium chloride solution, for example, this sodium chloride solution, and we call it at 0.9% of sodium chloride, it means that we have 0.9 gram of sodium chloride per 100 ml of water. 0.9% sodium chloride solution means we have 0.9 gram sodium chloride per 100 ml, or it simply means we have 9 grams per 1000 ml or per liter. We have 0.9% means 0.9 gram per 100 ml or 9 grams per liter. Now the molecular weight of sodium chloride is 58.5 gram. Molecular weight of NaCl is 58.5 gram per mole, and the molarity is basically 9 grams. Basically we are having 9 grams per liter, and its molecular weight is 58.5 gram per mole. So its molarity, which is basically moles, number of moles per liter, is 9 by 58 is 0.154 moles per liter. Molarity is basically moles per liter. Moles per liter. So to calculate that how many moles of sodium chloride are present in this much 58.5 gram, to calculate that how many moles are basically present in 58.5 gram, we have to apply this formula. We basically know that 1 mole contains, we know that 1 mole of sodium chloride contains 58.5 gram. As we previously discussed, that 1 mole of glucose has 180 gram, 1 mole of sodium chloride has 58.4 gram, 1 mole of sodium sulfate is 142.04 gram. So here we know that 1 mole of sodium chloride has 58.5 gram. So how many moles of sodium chloride will be present in 9 grams? So we need to know the moles per liter. Moles per liter. So that is basically the molarity. So we calculate the molarity, and which turns out to be 0.154 moles per liter. So initially we calculate the molarity. Now to calculate the osmotic pressure, we now have discussed that sodium chloride, each molecule has 2 active particles. So we multiply this number with 2 because every sodium chloride molecule has 2 osmotically active particles. Now if it was for glucose or if it was for albumin solution, then we would not multiply it by 2, but as sodium chloride has 2 osmotically active particles, so we multiply this molarity with 2 and we get this result. This is the osmolarity of the solution, because the molarity, basically its osmolarity is double of its molarity in case of sodium chloride. If it was for the glucose, then its molarity would equal to its osmolarity. But if it would be for sodium sulfate, then we would have to multiply it with 3 and its osmolarity would be triple of its molarity. But in case of sodium chloride, we have its osmolarity double of its molarity. So here we multiply it by 2 because every sodium chloride molecule has 2 osmotically active particles. We multiply its molarity with 2 and we get this value. Its osmolarity turns out to be 0.308 osmoles per liter or 308 milliosmoles. 308 milliosmoles per liter. Osmoles per liter or milliosmoles per liter. Now this is basically this is the adjusted value. This is the adjusted value. 286 is the adjusted value because all the sodium chloride particles are not free and they are not freely allowed to exert the osmotic pressure. Some of the sodium and chloride particles, they interact with each other as well and they cancel their effect of osmotic pressure. So we have to use the osmotic coefficient, and in case of sodium chloride, we have when we use the osmotic coefficient, the value turn out to be 286, which is basically around 90%, Now we know that the osmotic pressure can be calculated by putting the value of osmolarity in the equation of osmotic pressure. This is the equation for osmotic pressure, and this is basically predetermined. This is basically predetermined for a solution with osmolarity of 1 osmol. With osmolarity of 1 osmol, the osmolarity should be 19300 mm of mercury, and with a solution of 1 milliosmol, it should be 19.3 mm of mercury. Now how we calculate this value? We calculate this value by putting the values of concentration, the concentration of a solution, the gas constant and temperature. When this is basically this osmotic pressure is the product of the concentration, gas constant and temperature, and the symbol used for the osmotic pressure is basically the capital pi. The capital pi, or this is the pi, which basically denotes the osmotic pressure of denotes the osmotic pressure, and this is basically predetermined, and its value for 1 osmol is always 19300, and its value for 1 milliosmol is always 19.3. So if we want to calculate the osmotic pressure, we just need to multiply this number with osmolarity. As the osmolarity is 308 here, we have the 308 milliosmol. We have 308 milliosmol, and 1 milliosmol is basically 19.3. 1 milliosmol is 19.3. So 308 milliosmoles are equal to 5944. 308 multiply 19.3 is basically 5944 mm of mercury. This is basically the osmotic pressure. This is basically the osmotic pressure of 0.9% saline. 0.9% saline. Now, why we are taking 0.9% saline? This is because the normal body solutions are 0.9%. This is something which we are going to discuss in detail, but 0.9% saline is very, very important because it is the normal osmolarity. It is the normal osmolarity of the human body plasma. So if we take 0.9% of sodium chloride, it basically converts into 0.9 gram per 100 ml or 9 gram per liter. As the molecular weight of 1 mole of sodium chloride is 58.5, so its molarity turns out to be 9 by 58 is equal to 0.154 mole per liter. 0.154 moles per liter. So 1 mole is basically having 2 osmotically active particles. So the osmolarity of this much molarity, will be 0.154 multiplied 2, which turns out to be 0.308 osmoles per liter or 308 milliosmoles per liter. If we basically adjust for the interaction between the different particles and we apply the osmotic coefficient, then it will be 286. But we will use this number. Now, as we know, the 1 milliosmole value is 19.3, which we have calculated with Hoff equation. This is the Hoff equation. Hoff equation. Now, with the Hoff equation, we know that the 1 osmol is 19,300 or 1 milliosmol is basically 19.3. We just divide this number with 1000. So it becomes 1 milliosmol is 19.3. So if 1 milliosmol is 19.3, 308 milliosmoles will automatically become 308 into 19.3, or osmotic pressure of this 0.9% solution will be 5944 mm of mercury. So that's how we calculate the osmotic pressure of a solution. So instead of 0.9% sodium chloride, we can also use any other value and we can calculate the osmotic pressure of any other solution as well. Now, the osmotic pressure of a solution basically depends upon the number of solute, the number of osmotically active particles. If a lot of particles are there, a lot of water will be coming here, and the osmotic pressure will automatically rise, and the amount of pressure to prevent the movement of water from this region to this region will be very high. If the number of active particles are less, for example, the osmotic pressure of this saline, this sodium chloride will be high as compared to the osmotic pressure of albumin or glucose, because the number of particles here are high. So the osmotic pressure needed to stop the movement in this solution will be higher as compared to the pressure needed in this solution. But of course, it is important to take exact amount of each substance. For example, if we take 1 gram of albumin, 1 gram of glucose and 1 gram of sodium chloride, only then these values in particles will be applied. These numbers or these osmotic pressure equations can be applied. If suppose, for example, we take 3 gram of albumin or 2 grams of glucose and we just take 1 gram of sodium chloride, then the number of particles, of course, in these solutions will be high. So that's the end of the calculating osmotic pressure and osmolarity. Thanks a lot for watching the video.